Turn up the dive, feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, monsters. We are live here today on the Untold Radio Network. We are live, so make sure if you guys have any questions throughout the show, get them in the comments section, because today is going to be an amazing show and you want to make sure that you participate in this. Make sure that you subscribe, share all of this today, because we want to help share the network. So we have a lot to get through today and a lot of fun stuff that we have in store. So we want to go through this really quick here. So guys, if you are interested, I want to thank everyone who came out this past weekend to the Chicago Paranormal Convention. It was a great time down in Chicago. Thank you all for coming out. And if you want to see us in person, the CAPS team, we are going to be next at Squonkapalooza in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, coming up August 10th. It is free admission there. It's a whole downtown of fun. We are bringing out the Haydn Adventure Traveling Bigfoot Museum there. So if you guys are interested in seeing that in person, we are coming to Pennsylvania. We have a lot of other great presenters there as well. Myself, Ron Murphy, Daniel Benoit, Cryptids of the Corn, Eerie Travels Podcast, Bizarre Encounters, and Hillary Wilson. I can never read that one way down on the bottom there. And of course, guys, we are coming to CryptidCon in Lexington, Kentucky in November, and a whole bunch of stuff coming up next week. If you're in Wisconsin, I will be presenting at the Brookfield Library on Monday, June 17th, and I think it's Thursday, June 20th, I will be at the Belleville Library in Belleville, Wisconsin. And then July 16th will be the next one that I will be at in Wisconsin as well. All of those and all of the information there is for you at wisconsincaps.com. evolutionary.com. Head on over there and you can get all that information. We are live today, guys. So if you want to show your support for all things here on the Untold Radio Network, here's how.
Hey, Untold Radio Network fans. Want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
All right, guys, I hope that you guys are all ready for today's show. It's going to be a great one. I have a bio here to read, and it has a lot of big words, so I'm going to have to take my time and read this slowly. My guest today is Sara Skiba. She is from the Ape Institute. It is the only research center in the world dedicated to the study and conservation of the species most closely related to humans, the endangered bonobo. Ape Institute is a federally recognized nonprofit organization and accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the AZA, as an accredited related facility. With the focus on science, education, and outreach, the programs enrich the lives of bonobos and foster a deep connection between the people and the natural world. Bonobos are an endangered species of great ape with as few as 15 to 20,000 individuals in the wild. Understanding bonobo behavior and how they interact with one another is crucial if we're going to help save them. So, our guest today is a very accredited on her own here. She is the Director of Communication at the Ape Institute and a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Molecular and Cellular Biology. She is an expert on great ape behavior and has been working with Kanzi, I believe that's right, at the Ape Institute and bonobo family for 10 years. Dr. Skiba's research focuses on social communications in humans and our other closest living relatives, bonobos and chimpanzees. She incorporates evolutionary theory, behavioral neuroscience, and cognitive psychology to better understand the emergence of neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism spectrum disorder. As an Autism Speaks fellow, Dr. Skiba is investigating the relationship between auditory processing abilities, language skills in autistic children and adolescents. And we have links to both her page and the Ape Institute in the show notes if you're interested. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Dr. Sara Skiba. Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
How was that? Did I get through that okay there?
Yes, I apologize. That's a lot for a bio and for titles and everything like that. So you did great.
Thank you so much. It's early. I work third shift and then I take a nap and I do my show, and sometimes there's just some big words in there that just don't come out.
Early morning or not, it would be a mouthful for anyone. So
yes, very much. But I think that's awesome. It shows how accredited you are and the work and everything that you do. And I am super excited, as well as everyone in the chat is already going over here. So there we go. Let's start off right here. How long ago was the bonobo discovered?
That's a great question. So bonobos were for a very long time thought to just be chimpanzees. So for a long time, they were actually called, you might have heard of the term pygmy chimpanzee. So it wasn't until the late 1920s when researchers realized that bonobos were in fact their own species. And bonobos, what makes them so special among the great apes is they are only found in a small part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So instead of being found in multiple different countries within Africa, they're only found in one small region south of the Congo River. Probably explains why it took so long to discover them.
I was going to say, when we talk about like cryptids and other creatures, there's so many things that come out of the Congo. like the okapi, your great apes and stuff, and the Mokele-mbembe dinosaur creature that's supposedly out there. It's just such a hard place to get to and research because of all the stuff going on there politically and stuff. So very interesting. All right. Well, I just saw that question right off the bat, and I thought it was kind of fitting with an intro here. But first off, let's talk a little bit about the Ape Initiative and what your goals are, how long it's been around, and some of the stuff that you work on there.
Yep. So Ape Initiative is the only bonobo research center in the world. And we house 7 bonobos currently. And that includes Kanzi, who I think a lot of people may have heard of before. He's usually kind of the intro to bonobos for a lot of people. The first time they've heard of them is by hearing of Kanzi. And what we do at Ape Initiative is we really focus on science and education so that we can understand as much as we can about bonobos to teach the world about them and hopefully inspire people to save them and their habitats in the wild. Because they're so similar to us, we think that they pose a really nice bridge to getting people to connect to the natural world. And we think that's really important if people are going to save an endangered species.
Bonobos, not abobos. Lee got us off to a rough start there with a typo, but it's bonobos. For anybody out there listening.
No, that's a great question.
Example. We can go over here and take a look at that as well. Are bonobos the ones that are the nice ones, meaning they just love each another and do not act aggressively?
That's a really good question. So they are often referred to as the make love, not war ape. And the reason that is because bonobos display a really unique, what we call a sociosexual behavior. So they do something that's called genital rubbing. And it looks a lot like copulation, which they do also do, but it's not for the purposes of reproducing. This, what we call GG rubbing, is used and thought to be there to help ease social tension. So in times of conflict, and that can be both good and bad conflict, right? Like super exciting times when really good food is coming out, or scary times, or potentially socially stressful times, they will use this as a way to ease tension among the group and bring each other closer together. So that's why they get the make love, not war, or hippie ape kind of common popular name out there. But they do have some aggression too. I think you oftentimes think of one replacing the other, but they're just not as lethally aggressive as chimpanzees or gorillas can be. So I think that makes them thought of as a much more peaceful animal than the other 2 species.
Very good. Well, let's talk a little bit about them in the wild. Lee would also like to know, are they being hunted by bad factors?
Yes. So the greatest threats to bonobos in the wild are human activities. And so that's, some of the common ones that we think of for any endangered species, like habitat destruction and mining in their habitats. But that also is from something called the illegal bushmeat and illegal pet trades. So what often happens in great apes, especially bonobos, the adults are killed and hunted for their meat, and then the infants are sold into the illegal pet trade. And so one of our big missions at Ape Initiative is helping educate people about endangered species and the things that we can do to help protect them in the wild, because it really is up to us to be the ones to save them.
Absolutely. Now, you guys are, I'm fairly well traveled in the zoological community around the United States, and I know that there are not many zoos that have these animals. I know Milwaukee, right here in Wisconsin, does, but you're one of the few places that do. Is there any other places around that actually have these animals?
Yes. So we actually have a page on Ape Initiative's website. I can add it to the chat. It's just apeinitiative.org/US-bonobos, and that will tell you where all of the bonobos in the United States live. There are only 7 zoos that house them, and then ourselves. So there's 8 facilities total in the United States that house bonobos, and there's about 82 individuals currently living in the United States.
That's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about, we talked about the chimpanzee relationship there. How does the population relate as far as that? In the intro, it was about 15 to 20,000 bonobos. What is the population of chimpanzees for comparison?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I'll have to look. The one thing about chimpanzees is I think we have a bit of a better estimate because they're found across Central Africa. And so there are some sites that have been able to better estimate the numbers of individuals. Barnaby brought up a great point earlier that the DRC is a hard place to conduct research from a political standpoint. The habitat where bonobos live is, can be very swampy. And so you're coming into like waist deep water to watch them while they're high up in the trees. So that makes it much more difficult to estimate the numbers. What we do know is that there are way more chimpanzees in human care than there are bonobos. And, oftentimes when you're talking about bonobos, we have to say they're a lot like chimpanzees. And when you talk about chimpanzees, you don't have to qualify it. And I think that goes a long way for saying people know a lot more about the word chimpanzee, or it has a lot more name recognition than the word bonobo. But both are endangered in the wild. And so the same threats that are causing population decline in bonobos are also leading to population declines in chimpanzees. So they have the same endangerment status. I just don't know their numbers specifically.
Okay. Would you, just on generic, like based on like zoos and stuff like that, what ratio would you say? Like there's like 2 to 1 chimps to bonobos, or is there any
there's
kind of
over
comparison?
2,500 chimpanzees living in the United States.
Wow.
And 80 bonobos.
There you go. That's very
so,
telling right there. Yeah.
Yes. And I think even in AZA zoos, there's over 300 gorillas. So even if you're just thinking about zoo populations, I think there are over 250 chimpanzees in zoos in the United States, AZA zoos. So I think that, their numbers are drastically larger, both from an in-human care perspective and from a where we're able to sample them in the wild perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charlotte J, for getting the Ape Initiative link in there for us. We appreciate that very much. So there you go. That's the link to the bonobos in the US page. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the family structure of the bonobos. Like what they're very like troop oriented, right? So what is their family life? What does a typical troop look like in the wild from what you've been able to study?
Great question. So bonobos live in what we call fission fusion societies. And so what will happen is sometimes, usually during the day, they might be in large foraging parties. They can live in groups of upwards of 100 individuals. And then they might also that's the fission part. And then, the fusion part. So they might have these large groups, and then they might go off into these much more small, close-knit subgroups. And so you might find, 3 or 4 bonobos close together grooming and playing, whereas there are a number of other individuals far off and away from them. And so they can range in group size a lot. I think that they do spend some time alone as well, just like we do. But in terms of their social organization, bonobos are unique in the great apes in that they're what we call matriarchal. So instead of it being a single alpha male, which is what chimpanzees have as who's in charge of the group, it's usually a single alpha male, maybe a coalition between 1 or 2 males. In bonobos, it's a group of females that's in charge. And it's the females that hold the most dominant roles in their society. And so what will happen is the male sons get their rank from their mom, because the males stay with their moms for life. So if you've got a high-ranking mom, you're not as high-ranking as the other, as the females, but as a male, you might also have some status. And so all the other great ape species, it's usually the males that are the dominant sex. And so bonobos are unique in that it's groups of females that are in charge of their societies.
Very interesting. So just to make that clear, the orangutans, gorillas, all of the other great ape species, the males are, but these are female.
Yes, in orangutans, they're actually mainly solitary. So when they do come together, it's usually just for breeding, and the moms and the offspring spend a very long time together, but they don't live in multi-male, multi-female social groups. In gorillas, it's a single dominant male with a harem of females that he mates with. So he's protective over his group of females. And in chimpanzees and bonobos, it's mixed sex group. So you usually see almost an even ratio of males and females in the group.
Interesting. I know that a lot of people have speculated that the orangutans are probably the most similar in behavioral social networking to what we consider the Sasquatch or Bigfoot creatures. So it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I mean, given that they spend much of their time alone in the forest, I think that makes sense.
Absolutely. So let's talk about like the breeding and the lifespan of these creatures. How often do they reproduce? How many young at a time? And how long do they typically live?
Great question. So, of course, under human care, thanks to advances in medicine and being able to provide consistent diets and remove some of those serious challenges that living in the wild has, they do have a longer life expectancy under human care than in the wild. In the wild, I think that the average age of females is well into their late 30s, early 40s, and males a little bit earlier than that. I think early 30s. Again, the problem with bonobos in the wild is that we just don't know as much about them as we do other species of great apes. In captivity, they can live a very long time. So Kanzi is our oldest bonobo at Ape Initiative, and he's 43 years old. So older than me, which is kind of wild to think about. And his biological mom lives at Jacksonville Zoo. Her name is Laurel, and she is, I think, 57 years old, 56 or 57. And the oldest female just passed last year, and she was thought to be in her 70s. So they can live a very, very long time. I think that's a lot longer than many people think.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. How does that compare with some of the other great apes like orangutans or chimpanzees?
It's about the same. So chimpanzees and bonobos, their life expectancy is about the same, both in captivity and in the wild. I think that historically, they've counted older chimpanzees and bonobos than the other two species, but I'm not sure if that's a health factor or if that's more so based on something else that we just haven't tapped into. I don't want to speculate on why that might be, but all of the great apes can live quite a long time. So we're not unique in that. Orangutans have the longest inner birth interval. So I think it's 8 or 9 years before they will have another offspring. So that's how long that individual will stay with their mom, because it's so important to learn all of the skills you need to navigate the forest. So they spend a very long time with their mom because they'll otherwise be kind of off on their own. Bonobos, the inner birth interval, I think, is around 5 years, give or take. So if you think about a female, if she could live into her 40s, you could have 4 or 5 offspring quite easily.
Wow, that is interesting. I never thought of like how long in between having children they have. That's fascinating. So again, we're talking about bonobos in this, but we're trying to relate this back to what we speculate and know about, or think we know about Bigfoot and Sasquatch creatures. And when you're looking at if these things are only having infants every 5 to 8 years, sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating that they don't. So they only have one child at a time, or do they ever have twins or anything like that?
Twin reports are very rare. I think the ones that have happened under human care, some have survived. I know there are chimpanzee twins at one of the zoos. I want to say like Knoxville, maybe. I'd have to fact check that, but there are twin chimpanzees. There also have been twin bonobos, but I think only one successfully survived. And so twins are very, very rare. It's not like other mammalian species where, you have a litter or you have often 2 or 3 offspring at a time. It is usually one. And, in the wild, those interbirth intervals, I think, can be even longer depending on resource availability. In captivity, you see them copulate and breed more often just because they're not stressed for finding access to food and things like that. But yes.
Okay. So what is the sexual maturity of the great apes then? So if they're only having kids every 5 to 8 years, how long is it before they're actually able to have children of their own?
Awesome question. So we think for bonobos, it's around 9 to 13 years old is when they're reaching sexual maturity. So females in bonobos, this is true for both bonobos and chimpanzees, the females emigrate out of their natal groups and leave at the age of sexual maturity. So usually around 7 to 9 years of age, the females will leave their family group, leave their moms, and go to a new group. And for bonobos, they'll bond with the dominant resident females in their new group, breed with the male offspring of those females, and form a new family within that new troop. And the males, like I said earlier, stay with their moms and natal groups for life. And so in bonobos, you might see a male having an offspring a little bit earlier just because he doesn't have to leave and emigrate and form into a new group before having his first offspring.
So you're talking about the females being in charge of the bonobos. So you hear a lot about in the males are the ones that leave the group when they become sexually mature. And this is like the exact opposite with the bonobos.
Yes, exactly. It's true. Bonobos have very similar structures to the other great apes in that it's the females that leave and the males that stay. So this like male philopatric. I think in gorillas, both males and females leave. And so because a male stays with a group of females, he can't be related to her, any of them, obviously. So they avoid that by having both males and females leave. But for bonobos and chimpanzees, the females leave, but it's only bonobos where the females are in charge. And so there's something about that female emigration and coming into the new group and bonding with the resident females that's really important to bonobo society and just success as a whole.
All right, I think that's a good place to pause here for a second. We're going to take a really quick station identification break here. If you have any questions for Sara about great apes and Sasquatches, put them in the comments section. We will get to them as soon as we can. We have a lot more to get through, so it's going to be a great second half here. We'll be right back.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
All right, we are back with Dr. Sara Skiba. She is from the Ape Institute out in Iowa, correct? And
Yes.
we are talking all about the bonobo creatures. And speaking of those, here's a question for you. Are bonobos more closely related to us than chimpanzees, or is it about the same?
Thank you, Jennifer, for your question. So bonobos and chimpanzees are equally related to humans. So we think that a common ancestor between humans, bonobos, and chimpanzees diverged about 6 to 8 million years ago. And bonobos and chimpanzees diverged from a common ancestor from one another about 1.5 to 2 million years ago. So they are each other's closest relatives. But what makes it really cool is that bonobos and chimpanzees are more closely related to humans than they are to any of the other great apes. And we're more closely related to bonobos and chimpanzees than we are to the other great apes. So bonobos, chimpanzees, and humans are more each other's closest living relatives, not gorillas, not orangutans, which you might usually think. So the three of us are each other's most closely related.
Wow, that's awesome. All right. So I have a couple more questions here on just generic stuff with these guys. So we talked about the lifespan and the breeding of these guys. So do any of the great apes, any of the bonobos or anything have any kind of death rituals? We always hear the question, in Bigfoot and stuff, where's the bodies in that? And one of the things that was speculated is that they possibly bury them. So is there any kind of this behavior, or what do they do with the dead in their societies?
So there have been reports of, especially in chimpanzees, again, I think our lack of bonobo findings more has to deal with the difficulties of studying them than it not existing in that species. But there have been a lot of reports in chimpanzees and even gorillas where they will carry deceased offspring for days and months at a time. And so there's actually, I think, a current case happening at a zoo in Spain where the female chimpanzee has been carrying the deceased offspring for months. Personally, I would have intervened. I think at that point, just given the potential disease pathogens there and things like that. But I think what it speaks to is the individuality of grief. And, we can't ask them what it means to have another individual pass. But I do know, it's kind of an unspoken protocol when you care for them in captivity that you allow them to see the deceased body, whether it happened while they're present or not. So if an animal passes under anesthesia, for example, it's really important to still allow the group to mourn and to see that individual. But you also have to be careful because you don't know how they're going to respond to the presence of a no longer responding individual in their social group. And so I think really nothing is known about death rituals in these non-human great apes. And I think a lot of times in the wild, it's just too hard to follow up, and you might not see when that individual passes, and you might not see the group right when that happens, or be able to find the exact location the next day when you go to look for remains. That's very challenging. And I think, on top of that, we don't know enough about what they conceptualize it as. So I don't know of any stories of them burying dead, but I don't think it's out of the question to think that another species could take that approach. I actually do think there's some evidence in elephants that they might do that. And they're another matriarchal species. So I guess there's some hope there.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So just to kind of be clear on what you said there, so a lot of the times when you do study these different ape species in the wild, when one does pass away, even the researchers that are out there have a hard time finding the bodies?
I don't know for certain. I think that is challenging. When you think about finding remains, you don't normally associate that with having a full catalog of that animal's life before it passed, and especially not in the time of passing. If, for example, a troop, fight broke out with another troop and they had casualties in a group of chimpanzees, you would be nowhere near that event to be inspecting. Now you could come back later, and that's certainly possible, but I think the opportunity to record the animals in those instances is already very hard. I just don't want to speak to it. I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not saying that there haven't been reports. It's not my area of expertise. And when we're caring for them in captivity, we're responsible for the disposition of the body. And so that obviously isn't something we have studied at length in that setting. So
no, that's fair. That's 100% fair. When you talk about showing the deceased to the troop and stuff, what have you had that interaction so far at the Ape Initiative, and what has been the response from the other apes?
Thankfully, I have not. So one of the matriarch of the group of Ape Initiative. So Ape Initiative has been an organization since the end of 2013, but the bonobos have been in Iowa for longer than that. So the oldest female who had been taken from the wild, so we don't know exactly how old she was. We think in her late 40s when she passed, Matata. She did pass in early 2014, and she was with the bonobos when she passed. She passed in her sleep in her nest at night. So we didn't have to do a reintroduction process there. The bonobos were with her and able to be with her when she passed. And so thankfully, I haven't had to be a part of those processes, but in some of the facilities I've worked at with chimpanzees, you have had the unfortunate event of someone passing when they're not in with the group. And I do know in those cases, they do still present the body, even if it's outside of the enclosure with access to be able to touch and feel and interact safely, I think is probably the best way for that to be done.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you haven't had to deal with that, but very good, very good. So you brought up another thing right there, talking about the nests. Can you talk a little bit about, the sleeping habits of the great apes in general, bonobos? Do they have one nesting area that you know of in the wild, obviously, or do they have new ones every night? Do they kind of move in a certain area? How long do they stay in those areas?
Yes. So the bonobos build both day nests and night nests. They build a new nest every single night. And so in the wild, that will be in the trees, and they will weave branches together to form a nice soft nest. We give the bonobos at Ape Initiative a lot of different nesting materials to do the same thing. So they make theirs out of blankets and like a nesting material. It's like a very thin wood shaving that's soft and fluffy. So they incorporate that and different tree branches into their nests. And from reports from the wild, it sounds like actually the bonobos are nesting alone. So even though they're living in these extremely large groups and spending time with a number of different social partners, it seems like when they're nesting, they're usually nesting alone. And we often see that with the bonobos. They have preferred nesting spaces. They usually like to nest up high, unless it's the winter and the floor heat is on. Then they build a really nice, big, comfy nest on the ground. But they are almost always in their own nest. They will early in the morning push their nest together and groom with each other and kind of build a big giant blanket nest. But they're usually, when they're sleeping, actually off by themselves.
Very good. Do they, as far as like the social structure of the nesting itself, do you have like a sentry or anything that would stay awake and kind of like watch over the group?
That's a good question. I do know someone conducted a sleep study with the bonobos at Ape Initiative, just watching from cameras at night, looking at their activity. And it seems like all of them, for the most part, once they're in their nest, they stay asleep. But Kanzi got up a few times throughout the night. And I think that has more to do with his age. Apparently in humans, it's very common for men in their late 40s, early 50s to get up multiple times throughout the night. And so Kanzi looked a lot more like some of the older humans in that regard, whereas everyone else stayed quite asleep. They're very vigilant animals. So if they hear something in the middle of the night, they will alarm call, they will call back to each other, they will get out of their nest and inspect things. I think because they're arboreal forest dwelling animals, I like to think of it like when you're starting to fall asleep and you feel that jolt shock, like you're falling, like they must have something prickling at any time to feel that, because if they're nesting high in the trees and they're not paying attention, they could fall. And so I think that they're quick to respond when they hear things out when they're sleeping.
Very good. We have a question here from Jennifer. Thank you for being a Super Chat member, by the way. Have you ever seen the pictures of the potential nests that were found in the Olympic project? And if so, what do you think of them?
I have not, but I can look them up, and I would be happy to, if Barnaby, if you know them and could describe them just a little bit.
I have not seen them, actually. I've had people from the Olympic project on there, and I don't know that there's pictures out there. I know there's some video from Small Town Monsters. They got to go out there and do some filming. So if anybody has a link to that, that would be great. We can pull them up here and take a look at them together. But otherwise, I don't know. But that's awesome. Okay. As far as orangutans or any other creatures like that, do you know anything about their nesting habits?
Yeah, so orangutans are solitary in general. I'm think that the moms and young offspring will share a nest when they're younger. So in the great apes, even if the offspring are spending time away from mom and doing things on their own, they're usually always sleeping on or next to mom until they're 5 or 6 years old in bonobos, even older sometimes in other great apes. So I do think you will see some co-nesting of moms and offsprings in orangutans, but otherwise I think it's almost a completely solitary lifestyle for them. So the adult males, if they come in contact with one another, I don't think it's to be affiliative and to have a nice social interaction.
Very good. Awesome. All right. One thing you brought up, moving right along here, you were talking about the alarm calls and stuff that they make. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot to make any noises or replicate anything here, but can we talk a little bit about like what kind of vocalizations do they use? What are they used for? And what does an alarm call sound like?
So bonobos have very high pitch, high frequency vocalizations. So if I don't know if you've seen the newest Planet of the Apes movie, but when they try to, kind of display bonobos, you have to think of their voice. Like a bonobo would really be coming in going, "What a wonderful day," not, a big boisterous guttural voice. And so bonobos have a very squeaky sound to their vocalizations. It's a lot of peeps, peep yelps, and their alarm calls are very loud. And so there's small ones that they make that are just a wah, wah, something like that. They're waiting for a response, but they can have long broadcast vocalizations that can last many seconds. And they do oftentimes, because they're in multiple different groups and individuals are moving between the groups, they will wait for a response and call back. So there's a lot of cross communication happening between the groups, even when everyone isn't all together.
Do you find that's a lot of the case is the communication is over great distance as opposed to being close?
Yes. So that is one of the hypotheses about why bonobos are thought to be using vocal communication, having these really high pitched vocalizations, is that in the wild, chimpanzees are usually foraging on clumped fruiting resources. So like a fruiting tree, which requires you to be in close proximity to one another. You don't need to yell or have a very loud vocalization if you're 2 feet from me while we're eating on the same tree. But for bonobos, they're foraging or thought to be foraging on more spread out, dispersed herbaceous vegetation in their environment. So there have been studies showing when they're eating as a group, they have a larger inter-individual distance between 2 individuals while they're foraging than chimpanzees do. So it's thought that the high-pitched broadcast vocalizations and their reliance on a lot of vocal communication as compared to the other great apes has to do with spending a lot of time in far distances from one another when they're searching for food and things like that.
One of the things that's been brought up in Sasquatch research and that is the use of infrasound. Have you heard any of that, or has there been any audio research or anything done to see, do any of the great apes produce infrasound?
That's a wonderful question. I think that there is a lot to be done in terms of understanding what components of vocalizations that they make that we hear and are audible to us, and are there components that are not. There's not been enough research done. A lot of the technology we use is set to our hearing potential. But on top of that, I think there's very little to anything known about what they can process from an auditory perspective. So not only are their vocalizations reaching into a range that maybe we can't hear, but they would have to be able to hear that if they have those vocalizations. Otherwise, there would be no functional reason to produce a sound that's louder than what you can hear yourself. And so I think that it's just a lack of available research. It's really hard to test auditory processing in the bonobos. And I think their vocalizations would be a really good first place to look.
Okay. I want to also touch on here. I'm going to try and I got a picture here. I'm going to try and pull that up for us of the nests. But when you talk about the fact that there's not research done on those things, can you talk a little bit about the fact that, a lot of these people are like, well, we know everything there is to know about chimpanzees. We have them in zoos, we can study them. And obviously bonobos are different because you can't get to them as much in the wild. But the whole fact that just because we have access to them doesn't mean that there's funding for those specific things. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I'm going to try and pull this up over here.
Yes. You must have been like on my other Zoom calls today, Barnaby, because it's been all about funding for the grade 8 research. So one of the largest challenges is the access to funding. And I think that unfortunately, from a human health perspective, we've really moved away from any funding towards understanding great apes as it pertains to that. And we could get into a long conversation about why I think that is. But that is the greatest limitation. I think that we unfortunately have had these research resources, and by research I don't mean biomedical research. I mean the stuff that we do at Ape Initiative, for example, is all behavioral research and cognitive research that the bonobos get to choose to participate in. But I think that for a very long time we were not collecting enough on the animals that were a part of research, and so there were a lot of chimpanzees involved in research for many years to develop vaccines for humans and things like that. And I think we probably ignored a lot of the really interesting things that chimpanzees do on their own in the process of trying to learn more about ourselves. And so the largest challenge we have to, helping great apes and understanding great apes is funding.
Absolutely. I don't know. There's kind of a picture here. Let's see if I can pull this over here.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of see it looks like right down here. Can you see that or not?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So that looks like it's one of the nests from the Olympic project that we were talking about.
Great. Yeah. From what I can see in the photo, it looks probably more developed than a nest that I would see a bonobo making, only because it looks like it might be more on the ground. So you'd have access to some of that ground cover. But it mimics what a lot of the things that you see the bonobos doing, right? It's not just the bare branches that get incorporated. It's not just the leafy branches. There's a combo of different materials that get woven into one nest. And I think that some bonobos are better nest builders than others. And I'm guessing some Sasquatches would be better nest builders than others in that regard too.
Absolutely. Yeah. From what I know about the nests up there, they were found in one little area. They were made of a lot of like pine boughs and stuff, and very soft bedding material as well. But they were definitely all in one area. And then they actually found a second nest site as well on a ridge, a couple ridges away. So
awesome.
Very good. Okay. So we talked about the infrasound and audios and stuff like that. What other communications have they been recorded using? We hear a lot about wood knocks, where like we believe that it's either one of two things, like they take a stick and smack it on a tree to make these wood knocks, or that it's a popping of the mouth. So are either of those two behaviors characteristic of bonobos or any of the other great apes?
So I think wood knocking, I would more so what first comes to mind is that chimpanzees do what's called buttress tree drumming. So they will go to the base of a buttress tree that it's kind of hollowed out towards the bottom, but is a strong tree, and they will hit it, kick it, and like pound and jump on top of it to make sounds. And you can hear those for much farther distances than I think you would think. Chimpanzees and bonobos are very strong. So I think that unlike ourselves, they probably don't need another object to hit the tree with, because they are so strong. They can probably make quite a bit of noise just by drumming. I've heard chimpanzees in the wild drumming on trees, and just with their legs, they're able to kick quite a lot of noise. But the bonobos at Ape Initiative and bonobos in general display. It's what we call display. So they will run and push objects along to make a loud noise. And so they'll grab, like if they get an enrichment that's like a hard plastic tube, they will rub it along the ground and then throw it at the end of their big display to make a lot of clattering noise. And that's thought, to be a sign of dominance and or to convey their own individual strength. And so they do that often, especially when they're meeting new individuals or having something exciting happening.
Interesting. We hear about like bluff charges from the Sasquatches, or like a territorial display of, get out of my area or something. It sounds kind of like that's what you're describing there.
Yes. So gorillas have the best example of that with the chest pounding display that the males do. It's thought to signify strength through the noise that they're able to create by chest pounding. But bonobos have more of a whole body display. So the males will oftentimes bluff over each other or the females by running and charging at them and then pulling their one arm over the whole body of the other individual. I think to us, we would find that extremely rude and an invasion of our personal space. But to them, it's quite a normal part of how they're communicating.
Charlotte J says I was not showing correct pictures here. So here's the other picture that shows a person in the nest. Yeah. So I don't know, just kind of thought I'd bring that back up while we're there.
Yeah,
but
I think I would choose similar materials if I were building a nest as well.
Yeah, so they're very big, obviously. On that point, we're talking about Bigfoot being, 7 to 9 feet tall, and here you have a nest built that a person can be in. How big is the average bonobo?
So Kanzi is considered large for a bonobo. So he's close to 150 pounds. An average male bonobo is around 110, 120, more close to that. They're the smallest of the non-human great apes. And so they're even smaller than chimpanzees, not by a ton, but they are both weight and size. And so their nests are still quite large, though. Like our smallest bonobo, Clara, she is 14 years old and she's only, I think, 85 pounds, 90 pounds. And she builds one of the largest nests. It looks like, like the Prince and the Pea. That's how many blankets she has stacked on top of each other before she's just sitting like a crown on top of it. So I think that their nests are more proportionate to their interest in spending the time to have a comfy place. Some of them, one blanket thrown down and barely covering something is enough. And for others, they spend, 20 or 30 minutes weaving different components to get it just right.
Very cool. We are coming up at the end of the hour here, and I want to ask you real quick, do you have a couple more extra minutes to hang around here?
Okay. Yep.
Okay, good. I have a couple more things I want to get through, and then there's some questions in the comments. I just want to make sure that you don't have any prior obligations or anything, that we can get through these things here.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing is that, we see what some researchers believe are stick structures. These like woven things that aren't nests. They don't serve any kind of nesting or that we know of. So are any of these structures, like very interwoven, hands manipulated? Do you find anything like that in any of the great ape species, that they form kind of, again, nonverbal communicational things, or maybe not even for communication, but anything other than nests that these animals are building?
Well, there are definitely records of chimpanzees in the wild making tools. So they will fasten certain things in their environment into a tool that's usable to them. So not just grabbing a branch, but grabbing a branch that's the right size, that's the right dimensions, stripping it of all of its leaves, pulling off the bark in an intricate way. There's also some evidence in Fongoli where the chimpanzees have been known to spear hunt. So they will fasten sticks into sharp, blunt objects and use them to hunt bush babies that are lodged in the trees at night. I have not personally seen this myself, but that sounds really awesome. So they definitely do use tools, and they definitely fasten things in their environment to help them navigate things more proficiently. I'm trying to think if there's any examples where they would use it as communication. I think there's some examples of bonobos using objects to initiate play. So they'll use a leaf and dangle it in front of the face of another and then drop it to get them to look up in the canopy and things like that. But in theory, their forest environments are sufficient enough to provide them everything they need from a shelter perspective. And so I think you wouldn't see as many structures being formed that wouldn't serve the direct function, like for a nest to go to sleep in and to be up in the canopy in.
Very good. And you kind of actually touched on my next thing too. There was actually a research paper, and I'm not sure who put it out, but I've heard a lot about this, about how the great apes now seem to be coming into a stone age where they're learning tools and manipulating things like that. What have you got to say on that topic, besides what we already kind of have covered?
Yeah, I think that, oftentimes we look at non-human animals and the things they're doing from our specific lens, right? Like, how would it function today in society, and why would we have that from our perspective as humans? But these species didn't evolve to be humans or evolve to be under the same constraints as humans. They're their own separate species that has their own unique characteristics. And so I think when we think of tool use, or kind of where the great apes are now in their own evolution, so to speak, I think it, asking questions like, why is that important to them in their everyday lives, and how can we learn more about what's so unique about them? I think we have to take it back the other direction. A lot of the things that we do comes from a very anthropomorphized human lens, and I think it'd be really cool to look at some of the more, innovative things that great apes are doing in the wild, but from their perspective, or from a lens not so human centric.
Absolutely. Very well said. Now, one of the main things that I wanted to touch on is your primary focus on research in your bio and stuff is autism in these creatures and how it affects and the humans and stuff like that. And we were talking a little bit before the show. There's several researchers that believe that Bigfoot shows very autistic tendencies, where you'll put out a bunch of stones or crayons or marbles and they will sort them by color. My team actually has researched an area where one of these creatures took a garbage can off of someone's deck and they sorted food scraps to other things and took the food scraps and left. So what have you noticed between the autism and these creatures and how it relates?
Great question. So I think it's important first to start by saying, autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders or human mental illnesses, or however we want to conceptualize any of these concepts, are human disorders, right? So we can't diagnose a bonobo with autism, nor would we want to. But what we can do is think about, the underlying systems that lead to human social communication, and how one person can be bilingual and, have strong eye contact and understanding of reciprocal social relationships, and another human, be nonverbal and struggle with those same types of cognitive abilities. And so I think that a lot of the research that I do looks at bonobos and chimpanzees because they are our closest living relatives. as a way to ask questions about that basic system, like what leads to individual differences in how social and how communicative you are and how good you are at understanding those things. And one of the questions that comes up often is like, well, like how would the autism phenotype or something like that evolve? Like if sociality is so important to human evolution, like why would that phenotype exist? And I think it's getting at, Barnaby, kind of the question you were asking, which is there are a lot of advantageous things to not being super social, right? Like autistic people can be excellent at a number of different things and it not be a social thing, right? Like you think of like kind of this analog approach to things, like being very savvy in engineering and computer science and finding what that individual is really good at. If object perseveration is a component of the phenotype, maybe that was really important for navigating forest environments and being the individual that finds where you're going to put your habitat, right? Like that's not a very social thing. You have to understand all these other components. So I think in thinking about, again, we often think about like what makes us so human is this like highly social, highly communicative thing, but there are people who don't present in that way, and finding out what they're very good at and individualizing things to better understand people in those domains is really important.
There's a old adage, you cannot judge the intelligence of a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
That's a great point.
I think that's absolutely relevant there, is, to say that, humans are the smartest animal on the planet at what we do.
Right. At being human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And any of these other animals, you cannot slap the same labels on and say, well, they're not as intelligent as us. Well, yeah, but can you swim under the water? Can you breathe, with gills? No. So you do not have the same adaptations. You do not have the same intelligent level and communication styles as the other animals. It doesn't make them any less intelligent or anything.
Right. Or any less interesting. Absolutely. I can't climb a tree while holding 8 different food items with an offspring on my stomach and back. It's not possible. Mm-hmm. But bonobos do it with ease. So
absolutely. Well, that is the end of my line of questioning. We have a few over here in the comments to get through. If you have any questions, get them in now, and we will try and get them in with as much as we can here. So first off, this is going back to the next question, more of a comment. So STM is Small Town Monsters. It's a video production company that does a lot of research into, Bigfoot and other cryptids and creatures and stuff. And they have a document on the Olympic project that you'd be, possibly very interested in. I think they're mostly on YouTube. You can watch them all, but I think they're free and stuff. But they do an amazing job, Small Town Monsters. I want to say it is either Alexander Petikoff, who is my next guest next week, is the one that did this, or Eli Watson is the one that went out. So maybe touch base with him if you want more information, or otherwise just get in touch with the Olympic project, because very interesting stuff coming out of there. But anyway, on that, have you had anything with like hunting blinds with these creatures? Do they form any kind of blockages or anything to hunt?
I'm trying to think. I do know that chimpanzees have been known to hide in caves in the presence of leopards. That's not for hunting, but that's using a location they otherwise would not find themselves in to avoid predators. And I do know, in order to hunt, for a chimpanzee or bonobo to hunt a diker, a small deer, or, a small primate, you still would need the help of other individuals. So chimpanzees will do this as a group. They will hunt collaboratively together. And so I think that you see a lot of social manipulations that go on in order to probably help them, much like you think of when you think of group hunting, like in lions or in hyenas and things like that. So no evidence that I know of where they're using a physical object for that purpose, but definitely from a social perspective, they're using each other for that purpose very much so.
Awesome. Bigfoot Society says it's On the Trail of Bigfoot is
Great.
the actual documentary specifically on the nests. So you kind of brought the caves up there. A lot of people believe that these creatures live in caves or underground, and that's why we're having such a hard time finding them or tracking them. Is there any kind of any other great apes that use caves or underground passages or anything for shelter or nesting or any of those purposes?
I think, like I said, I think there is some evidence of chimpanzees using them for predator avoidance, and I think that depends on the habitat too. There are some gorilla species that are more ground dwelling than others. So Western lowland gorillas are thought to spend more time on the ground than some of the other gorilla species. And so there might be some differences there in terms of how much they're using the ground and the different environments that could create. Bonobos are the most arboreal of the African great ape species, and then orangutans are the most arboreal of all of the great apes in general. So I think it's orangutans are spending something like 80% or 90% of their time in the trees. So that's not really a good comparison. I'm not really sure what they would do on the ground in that small percentage of time. The same for the bonobos in the wild, but I do think that you see them using different parts of their habitats depending on the kind of overall ecological landscape that they live in.
Very good. Bigfoot Society would like to know, has there been any reports of Bigfoot sightings or strange occurrences reported around your initiative research center?
I feel like they've been there before. No, our Ape Initiative is on 230 acres of gorgeous Iowa hardwood forests. And so we do have a very cool, like it was built by humans, and we do know that, but there's like a very cool old brick structure out in the woods that was not a part of our organization that I think, some people like to have fun with telling the potential origin stories of that. But I have not heard of any Bigfoot sightings. We often do get calls about the bonobos in reference to them as if they might be a cryptid out in the forest. So we have had calls being like, I saw what looks like Bigfoot on grounds. Is everything okay? And we have to explain that's just Kanzi, looking for his breakfast. But yes, I don't know of any true Bigfoot stories yet on site, but I will definitely keep you posted if I hear any.
Awesome. I believe Bigfoot Society, are you from Iowa, right? I know that you do a lot of work out there with the Van Meter Festival and stuff in Iowa, so I'm not sure where you're actually based out of, but I think you're from Iowa. That's incredible to hear. Thank you. Earlham. It's from Earlham. There you go. If you have any other questions, get them in now, and we will address them before we sign off here. But what was I saying? With your center, how far away can you hear vocalizations? Like anything that's out in the woods out there, how far can people hear that? And do you ever get calls like asking, what was that noise or anything?
Good question. So I think that I don't know the exact distance that a bonobo vocalization can carry, but I reckon it's probably at least half a mile, if not more. The bonobos vocalize very loud, and depending on what's going on, like I said, that can sometimes happen for many seconds at a time. Thankfully, we have a train nearby, so I think that creates enough of a buffer every once in a while that we don't have as many direct neighbors that I think hear the bonobos. Our biggest deterrent around there are like gunshot sounds and things like that from local hunting lands. We don't have, I don't think anyone's calling on behalf of that. So yeah, the bonobos are definitely probably the most unique sound you will hear in the Des Moines community for sure.
Awesome. Very cool. So thank you so much for this interview. It has been absolutely amazing to get somebody of your accreditation to come on and talk to us about the just bizarre topic of Bigfoot. It's so nice to hear you guys being open to that and sharing your information and resources with us. And so I want to thank you for that. And before we go, I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about that. We have one last question here, though. Arboreal is tree dwelling, right?
Yes, correct. So arboreal meaning spending time in the trees. Yes. And do bonobos or gorillas roar? They bark. So gorillas have a much more deep guttural sound to their vocalization. Same with chimpanzees. Gorillas the most. So it's a really deep, like I can't even produce the sound. I'd be much better at imitating bonobos and chimpanzees, but they have a bark. So it's called like a wah bark. Chimpanzees, it sounds more grumbly, but that's how they tell each other like a no or something scary, or they're being intimidating too.
Good. And I feel like I'm completely remiss because I missed one whole topic here on scent. So a lot of people report this like skunk or horrible scent around these creatures, and it's not that common in the Bigfoot. A lot of people think it's every single Bigfoot smells that way, but it's only very few samplings of that. I've heard that gorillas have a kind of like a intimidating scent that they can release. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the other great ape species that have it?
Yes. So male silverback gorillas, and that's the ones that have the giant crown on their head. They have the silver hair on their back. The dominant, fully mature males, male gorillas have a musk that is absolutely uncontrollable. It smells stronger than any skunk you would get sprayed with. You can smell it from a very long distance away. And it is the strongest out of the great ape smells. They are known for emitting this very musky, I mean, I guess like humans would describe it more as like a body odor. I think if you work with them long enough, maybe you would describe it as a pleasant scent, but I don't think anyone's initial response would be that that's an enjoyable scent. So.
Very good. That's not, yeah. No, yeah, there we go. My chat jumped up on me just as I clicked on.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah. Lee would like to know if you expected this many Bigfoot questions. And on that note, do you get a lot of Bigfoot questions at the Institute?
We don't that often. We did do a recent collaboration with Sasquatch Sunset, a film following like a documentary about a Sasquatch family by the Zellner brothers. And we did that having the bonobos watch the movie. And they were fascinated by watching the film. It's completely, there are no words or dialogue in the movie. So it's just the acting of the actors as Sasquatches. And so the bonobos, I think, were really captivated by that because most human movies rely so much on dialogue and so much on, the visual effects to really create a story. And it was clear that the bonobos were picking up on some aspect of a story just watching the Sasquatches on the screen. And so that was a really cool collaboration we got to do that I think probably will now bring on a lot of Bigfoot and Sasquatch questions as it pertains to the bonobos. But, I think bonobos are such a rare, unknown species that we're just happy to get any questions about them. So.
Awesome. I don't want to keep you all of a sudden, like our comment section decided to ask questions. Have you ever noticed that they gravitate towards children more?
Yes. The bonobos love interacting with visitors through glass, and they are drawn to children, it seems, much more. I think that kids have a very playful demeanor, and they're very unassuming, and they're very confident, and they just go up and start interacting and doing all things fun. And so the bonobos really enjoy that. They use a lot of the same gestures and play in many of the same ways. And so I think they overall gravitate towards children. I think we as a human species are known to have like a fascination with neoteny, like young baby looking things. So I think they also probably share a little bit in that.
Last question, I promise.
Yep.
No more. All right. This is it. What about the waxy substance that gorillas and other great apes can exude or whatever? I know our producer here, Doug Hychek, is working on the elbow vernix, which is this waxy substance, and looking for DNA and stuff on that. Have you any other great ape species? What can you tell us about that?
I'm not sure I've heard of it, to be honest. I'm not sure I know in relation to like on their hair or
So when Bigfoots and humans touch like glass or like any kind of shiny surface or anything, we leave this handprint, right? Like your
Mhm.
fingerprints and stuff like that. Um, Bigfoot is supposed to leave more of a waxy, oily residue, kind of like maybe like a sunblock kind of that would be excreted or from the hands or something like that. They don't have shampoo, they can't like clean like that. So,
Of course.
do you notice anything like that on like windows or anything at the zoos and that?
Yes, I mean, the bonobos make giant hand and footprints that, like, you would swear we never clean the glass, even if it was done 10 seconds before. They're just like, us, that they leave a lot of different prints. I think a lot of time it depends on what they've recently had to eat. So if they're eating a whole mango and while they're eating that, the mango juice is pouring over their hands, like you're talking about, scrubbing off the sticky fingerprints. And so I think that, we kind of forget, like, Sasquatches and other non-human creatures don't use tools to eat. They're using their hands to do everything. And so I think, like you said, you don't have the ability to clean or wash them. That, when they eat a lot of frozen grapes, it's like everyone has tacky fingers the rest of the day. So I think that definitely influences it, but they leave hand and footprints just like we do.
Interesting. Awesome. All right. You have been so gracious with your time. Thank you so much for
No
coming
problem.
on. Can you tell everyone, how can we help you guys? How can we reach out, support you? I know you guys do tours for some small groups and that. Tell us everything about the Institute and how people can get involved and help you guys out.
Thank you. Yes, I think the biggest thing we need is help raising awareness. Bonobos are the least recognized species of great ape. And I think the more people know about bonobos and the more they learn about bonobos, the more they feel connected to them. So following us on Instagram and Facebook, sharing our posts, sharing our website. We have a lot of free educational materials for students on our website. And if you ever have a cool project idea or you just want to get in touch, email us and reach out. And we'd love to hear from you. And just thank you so much for listening today and for tuning in to all things bonobos and Sasquatches. It was really fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Ma. Thank you so much. I feel, unfortunately, that, as I said, I heard someone from your institute on NPR, and I thought these are the people I need to talk to. And I feel like, unfortunately, because of this interview, a lot of my colleagues are going to be reaching out to you.
That's okay.
So you just have opened up a massive Sasquatch door here. And so I thank you so much for taking the subject seriously and coming on to share your knowledge, because it is so helpful to us who are out there, the citizen scientists looking for these creatures, to have a little bit of a acknowledgement that the things that we're seeing in the wild can relate to things that we know are these animals and some things that aren't. And it's Bigfoot Society says saddle up. Yep, he has a podcast of his own, and so I'm sure there will be emails coming your way, because like I said, our producer Doug Hychek already has said that he was going to be reaching out to you as well. So
Awesome.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you. This has
Spread the
been a
message.
pleasure, and just appreciate the time to be able to talk about bonobos. It's been really fun for me. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. The pleasure is all mine. I've been looking forward to this interview for quite a while now, and like I said, I found out about it from NPR, and then I stumbled across a video, like you had mentioned, about the Sasquatch sunset,
Yep.
and I'm like, well, if you're working with them, you
gotta talk to us.
It's done now. So we closed out the end of my last show with that commercial, or the showing the bonobos and stuff.
Did you?
And
Awesome.
we're gonna do that again when we wrap up here as well, for anybody that would like to see some bonobos and what your institute has to do, and again, the work that you did with Sasquatch Sunset as well.
Cool.
But
Thank you so much.
absolutely. As I said, your links to your website and research are in the show notes, and the Ape Initiative as well. So if you guys are interested, definitely check that out. Highly recommended. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. All right, guys, that does it for this week. Thank you again, Sarah, for coming on. You have been an absolute pleasure to talk to and share your wealth of knowledge here. It's been a great show. I think everyone really enjoyed it in the comments and stuff. So coming up, guys, if you want even more from the Untold Radio Network and myself and things here. Coming up this Thursday on my other show, The Paranormal Spectrum, we are interviewing Ronald Mayer, who is talking about the new research that he's done with Bradshaw Ranch. And that is coming up Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Time. And then right here back on Monday next week, we have Alexander Petikoff from Small Town Monsters, as we've kind of talked a little bit about today. And he is going to be talking about all things coming up with Small Town Monsters and the Small Town Monsters Festival coming up in Canton, Ohio. And as promised, guys, we are going to leave you with a look at the Sasquatch sunset and the Ape Initiative video. Take care, guys. I'll see you on the edge.
Every actor knows that a year after shooting a movie, you start your research. So that's why...
Hi, my name is David Zellner. Hi, I'm Nathan Zellner.
And I'm Jesse Eisenberg, and we are here in Des Moines, Iowa at the Ape Initiative to show a sneak peek of our new movie, Sasquatch Sunset, to our closest relatives.
Bonobos. No humans allowed.
In one of the computer programs they've done before, they move around an avatar on the screen. So I'm curious if she thinks she's very good at the VR tasks. I'm wondering if she thinks she could influence it in some way.
My name's Jared Tagliatella, and I'm the director of Ape Initiative in Des Moines, Iowa. The Ape Initiative is a research organization that's dedicated to learning as much about the species that's most closely related to us, the bonobo, and then sharing what we learn with the rest of the world. And the reason that we want to do that is because we think that when people know about and people understand these species, they are more invested in trying to conserve them. Bonobos are endangered. They're only found in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and their numbers are declining in the wild, and it's mostly due to the activity of humans. And so we're trying to do our best to educate the world about these wonderful creatures and kind of share what we learn with really students of all ages, with the eventual goal, hopefully, of being that we can reverse that decline.
We love primates and bonobos in particular, and because of the ape-like qualities of the Sasquatches in our movie, we were curious how bonobos themselves might respond to watching Sasquatch sunset. And you said they watch movies from time to time?
They do. They watch movies pretty regularly. It's more of a quiet activity, sort of relaxing kind of environment, but they do seem to enjoy different types of movies.
And how do you feel about their reaction?
Yeah, I think their reaction was really interesting. It was actually pretty nice for me to be able to witness them looking at these creatures that I'm pretty sure they've probably never seen any likeness like that. It bears a resemblance to them, but also bears a resemblance to humans. I think they seemed very interested in what they were doing. A lot of consistencies in their own behavior, perhaps.
How accurate was our depiction of these wood apes?
I mean, my main frame of reference is bonobos and chimpanzees. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's why I think when we first spoke, I said, hey, how much research did you do for this? Because you nailed a lot of the stuff. I was very, very impressed by that. So I think there's some things that are very close.
And what did you guys learn?
Watching them was pretty interesting after spending time thinking about those movements. What I found so funny and what was reminding me of doing it was just this very relaxed attitude towards things that are not so relaxed. I really don't want to be here right now. And it's just it's this really funny blasé quality that I associate with teenagers. Kanzi was pointing at something that he wanted. He was just yogurt. And he wanted yogurt, and he was getting pretty amped up about it, but still the pointing was just, it was just, yeah. I ate bananas with Kanzi, and then Kanzi opened his mouth, and I opened my mouth, and he seemed to take great pleasure in that,
yeah.
Right?
I think that's one of the things they like to sort of, without words, what'd you have for lunch? So there's only one way to do that, right? Is to physically inspect what you had for lunch, or you're having for lunch.
So Kanzi very specifically ate the banana out of the peel. He gets them frozen. He ate the banana out of the peel and threw the peel on the ground, but my banana was taking longer for me to eat, so and he started picking up his peel, and he was like, "Man, yeah. All right, I guess we're not done."
We really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to show Sasquatch Sunset to the bonobos. I feel like their reactions were
the purest audience we could have hoped for. And we hope that everyone out there gets a chance to see it. It's playing in select theaters and nationwide April 19th. And I hope you enjoy it as much as the Bonobos did.